All right, welcome back to a podcast here with Dave and Bill from Forest Hill today. We want to go over some things with you that's transpired over the last month or so after the session technically had ended. We want to talk about some real important things that I believe that you are going to really need to know going into July 1. Of course, we're going to talk about the collective bargaining, the cannabis retail sale bill, the assault weapons ban, the ban on hospitals. We're going to go into all that stuff in a little more detail so that you know exactly where you stand on those issues.
And Bill, it's been a lot of political theater since the end of the session. I tell you what, during the the discussion between the governor's office and the General Assembly, really some surprising developments in terms of the bills that we're going to talk about today, and really what it means to where we're at. The general political environment right now is really up in the air. In fact, I just heard today that there was some talk that we might even reach the first time in Virginia's history where we have a partial government shutdown because the budget bill is due very soon. I mean, we're going into the new fiscal year in a very short period of time.
Well, that's the problem you run into when you extend your session out for a budget is that fiscal year ends June 30th, and we're coming into the last week of May, so that gives you the whole month of June to try to figure out the differences in the budgets. And my conversations with legislators uh, that they probably are not going to meet till around June 30th, and
It's the 11th hour.
that's the 11th hour, and it's what they call political posturing.
Mhm.
And we'll go a little bit into that at the end
Yeah.
when we talk about the budget.
So let's talk about collective bargaining. This is a bill that we followed really closely. We did a ton of work during the General Assembly on this bill. It is the defining feature of this legislative season, and really it could be the defining feature for VSP and law enforcement and
Sure.
public employees in general. However, it's at this point not going to happen. So the governor vetoed the collective bargaining bill. There were a couple of reasons that were cited in that, cost being a primary factor. I followed a lot of information as it was coming out of localities, and this was red localities, blue localities, it didn't matter, cities, counties, and their primary concern was cost
Hmm.
and how they were going to implement it. The governor suggested that it be delayed for localities, that collective bargaining for public employees be delayed to 2030. That was her amendment. She sent that to the General Assembly. They sent it back and said, we don't like your amendment. We want to start it in 2028. And she vetoed the bill. So that's where that's at. It's dead for right now. I have heard a little bit of discussion that maybe it could find its way into the budget bill,
Yeah,
which
we'll
would be an
talk.
interesting political maneuver.
Those are the way the budget bill is where you really get into the politics of things, and I'll explain that at the end how the collective bargaining could find its way back just this year in a budget language.
Certainly could. So, as for right now, collective bargaining is not going forward. It is effectively dead as it was introduced. And
And knowing the budget process, the letter I sent to her to the governor prior to her vetoing it uh, was vitally important because I wanted to explain one more time why the state police is a unique agency, not like local governments where you're all in one
Mhm.
locality, you're spread across the state, and how much it hinders the ability for the state police to operate effectively if you are a part of a organization that has collective bargaining um, needs. And look, there'll be a group in Northern Virginia, Hampton Roads, Virginia Beach, Richmond, Southwest, Central, and Southside Virginia. Their needs are going to be separate, and it's going
They
to
will
be,
be.
I mean, living costs in some areas, uh, work conditions in some areas. They're all going to be different.
Budgetary constraints.
Exactly.
It really runs the gamut in terms of the issues that localities will run into, and statewide, governmental agencies
Right.
would have the same issue.
And that's where I think the governor realized that it was in trouble, because all the localities that were saying, no, we can't afford this. We already have the option and we've turned it down because of the cost of it. So
Right.
That's going to be an interesting situation once we get to that budget cycle. Mm-hmm. The next thing that we need to talk about, which is playing out to be very interesting, is the retail cannabis sale market. They depended heavily upon, the General Assembly did, a structure of a retail market for cannabis sales. They looked at that as a revenue source to bring in revenue. They didn't go into the regulatory measures as much as, we want to establish this framework. We want to get these sales going. They didn't consider the public safety piece of it. They didn't consider the mental health issues that arise from it. So there was a lot of things that was in the legislation to get a market started, but with a market comes other issues, problems that follow it.
Yeah.
And I think,
and I, without specific reference, I think that some of those problems that were perceived in terms of the structure or lack of structure in that bill are some of the same problems that other states have seen when they've gone to a retail market as well. And so I think that really the general environment for the bill too was very problematic. The bill's patron has some issues of her own, and
well, and that's another issue within
itself. Of course, that is mere speculation in terms of why it was vetoed. But
yeah, I mean, it creates a concern for the General Assembly whenever one of the main supporting factors in the legislator is a legislator that the FBI does a raid on and takes evidence from,
at a marijuana store. Yeah, nonetheless,
dispensaries.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's going to have a huge bearing on decision, and the governor basically in her comments is vetoing it, says, I want to get it right. I think she's been talking to states where they have a retail market, and she's looking at the problems that existed from that retail market. And her comments are, we want to get this right. We don't want to pass something that we don't have everything in order, and then we have problems from it.
Yeah. So it was vetoed. The governor vetoed it. It's effectively dead at this point. It's not moving forward in the current legislative year, unless, again, like we talked about, it finds its way back somehow, somewhere.
Right. Once again in the budget.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Which is law, by the way. We said we'd talk about that.
Yeah,
if it goes in the law, it is law. I mean, it goes in the budget.
But it's law. It's 2 years. 2 years. It is, exactly. And they can codify it.
Right.
Yeah. So the other thing is the assault weapons ban, of course, that she vetoed. This was a big controversial issue, and it immediately got a filing in the courts.
Yes.
To put an injunction on it and to rule it unconstitutional, and all those comments were made during the session about, the Supreme Court has looked at this, they've
already addressed the issue.
They've addressed this, and this is going to be unconstitutional. Yet they went ahead and pushed it forward, and it was signed into law. And so it's immediately when it was signed into law, that court injunction was filed. We'll see where it goes on the court side, but it does impact you. Number one, you got prosecutors saying this is not constitutional, I'm not going to enforce this, and then you have some prosecutors saying it's the law, I'm going to enforce it. And And then you got law enforcement that do carry assault rifles that if you were to be transporting one that you were off duty and it's your
not in your official capacity.
not in your official capacity, you could be charged with it.
Yeah, conceivably you could be.
Well, yeah, you could.
Yeah, and it's really, really complicated too. Bill, just in the last week or so, I personally have gotten calls from law enforcement officials, and whom I won't name, but and folks that uh, operate as a federal licensed firearms dealers, and they can't make heads or tail of this thing. It is very, very convoluted. It's a feature or a combination of features across several different weapons that would otherwise be prohibited. And just a simple feature like a threaded barrel on a rifle would be prohibited.
Right.
A pistol grip, a thumb hole stock in the pistol grip, a forearm that keeps you from burning your hand on the barrel is a prohibited feature. If you can believe that, and of course,
because it makes it look like a assault weapon.
But any one, it says one or more features on a rifle. I will point to you, a rifle that I own that has a traditional rifle stock on it, but it has a wood forearm to keep me from burning my hand on the barrel.
Right.
And that is a prohibited feature. So I think that really how it's drafted and the focus of the bill is very problematic, but it's also problematic constitutionally speaking.
Well, federal firearms, licensed firearm dealers would be prohibited from carrying it.
Yes.
Selling it, all that. So,
They are. Even for interstate commerce, they would be prohibited according to the bill as it was passed. And so we'll see how that goes. I suspect that there's going to be a lot of lawsuits. Like you pointed out, there were lawsuits right away, but there's going to be more because there are other folks that are affected, include the FFLs, in terms of what they have, and then they can't, at least in Virginia, they cannot sell it. So
well, and we did, talk to legislators about this and how it affects law enforcement, because a lot of law enforcement officers have these type of weapons and they use these weapons on a routine basis, and they could be transporting their issued weapon and not be in the official capacity of their duty, and you conceivably could charge them, and you could be in a district where you have an aggressive prosecutor that wants to do this. And I mean, there's a lot of problems that exist within that. The other firearm issue that we were very vocal on was the one in mental health hospitals, emergency rooms.
Well, it's any hospital that has a mental health component, which is most of the hospitals.
And they mentioned emergency rooms.
Yes, emergency and that connection to the mental hospital.
Right.
So it's really all of them.
Yeah, it's every hospital.
Yeah, even standalone emergency rooms and urgent care, things like that.
When it went to the governor did at least listen and offer the amendment to put all officers under 9.1 under the exemption. Defined in the exemption, and then they took it out and put it back in its original form, saying that you have to be there in your official capacity as if you were working a crime and it led you there to interview a witness, or if it was an accident that led you there to interview someone who may have been drunk, whatever. Mm-hmm. You have to be in that official capacity. So there's so many policies that now are going to have to be looked at over this thing, because if you're injured, what are you going to do with your gun? Because then you violate this law. Mm-hmm.
And that's a great example. Obviously, you're not acting in your official capacity if you're being transported to the hospital. If for some reason you find yourself in the back of the ambulance and you still have your gun, what are you going to do with it at that point? You're not acting in your official capacity. It would be a Class 1 misdemeanor if you take it into the hospital. What I suspect, Bill, is how this thing will play out, and what it will look like is the entrances to these mental health and emergency rooms. They're gonna start to look like TSA checkpoints.
Oh yeah,
and where you're really going to have the conflict, and I can see it playing out now, is you've got somebody who is not open carrying. They are undercover. They're going to the hospital for a business. They're in their official capacity, and they
Criminal.
look like a regular citizen. And then somebody in that hospital is going to challenge them on that. How are you going to prove what you're doing?
Yeah.
And the other thing is, if you are truly acting in an undercover capacity, you don't tell the person what you're doing, right? So how do you make access to the hospital if it's necessary?
And when you have multiple hospitals in an area like Richmond, you could be working and shooting. You don't know which hospital to go to, so you're just trying to find which hospital may have
Yeah,
um, had someone come in with a gunshot wound.
yeah. There's a whole host of reasons, and really the best argument that can be had is that police should be able to carry their guns when they're not in their official capacity for both public safety and for their own safety.
Absolutely.
Period. Whether it's in a hospital or not, they're not the source of the problem.
The problem is going to come when something happens at a hospital and someone has to respond.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a reluctancy and an uncertainty. Well, even if I respond,
Yeah.
what are they going to do? I've got a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of times when an officer's shot, there's a lot of law enforcement officers merge onto the hospital and they're carrying their weapons because they're working, and they're not there officially. They're there because one of their colleagues have been shot or
Yeah.
injured in a car wreck.
Make sure you secure it in your car at the hospital.
Yeah, because I could tell from these advocates that they're serious about, and they're looking to make an example of somebody.
Yes. Yeah, it'll come.
And it was signed, so it's law
Mm-hmm.
in the original capacity that it came out of the General Assembly. They passed by her amendments, which meant she could either veto it, sign it, or it'll become law on its own without her signature.
Yes. So we covered the collective bargaining. We covered the assault weapons ban, the guns in hospitals. That's going to be law. The other two have been vetoed.
Right.
There's been some undercurrent of talk about that some of these bills, which were really important agenda items for the Democrats in terms of both retail marijuana and in terms of collective bargaining. These were the defining bills in terms of their agenda. They're not going to happen. They could happen. That little undercurrent of speculation about whether or not they'll end up in a budget bill, we don't know. Because like how we started out telling you, they're going to wait till the 11th hour and to begin work on the budget. And we don't even know if the budget's going to be ready to go, or what it might look like. We don't really have a clear indication of what it might look like in terms of additional compensation or bonuses or whatnot.
Well, I think you have the political posturing going on. The governor is trying to make her defining moment. The General Assembly is trying to. It's the governor versus the General Assembly
assert
right now.
themselves.
Yeah, they're going to try to assert themselves in all the government operations. So when it comes now to the budget, as David said, we've got this period up until June 30th that they have to get a budget put together and sent to her. If they wait till the 30th and they go in at noon and they pass a budget and send it to her, she'll have till midnight to either sign it or make her amendments,
or force a partial shutdown.
or it will force a partial shutdown.
Mm-hmm.
Only emergency
essential
personnel is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Will be funded. There'll be furloughs that go on. So it could be and I don't know of any time it's been that way.
It's never happened, according to what I read.
Yeah, the closest we came was under Warner's administration. We were somewhere mid-June before we came up with a budget. But it's puts the state in a very, very dangerous light as far as when it comes to bond ratings, when it comes to continuing service. And a lot of this is hinging around data centers.
Yep.
Just to give you a quick overview, because most of you watching this video are concerned about that 3% raise that the governor put in, and it was for this year. after July 1, and then July 1 the following year, 3% each year. The way that the House structured it, they took away 1%. So they made it 2% in uh, July of this year, 2% in July of next year. The Senate allowed the 3% to go forward, and they took away the tax incentives to data centers to backfill their budget to do the projects that they want. Now, each one of these budgets, the House budget, the Senate budget, they have the framework already built into the budget for collective bargaining and for cannabis retail sales. Um, how they pay for this is a lot to do with data center taking away the tax exemptions, and
And by the way, that's $1 billion. That's
$1
the
billion,
tax
yeah,
liability that they do not have to pay currently.
right, $1 billion. And if you figure in what the framework for those two bills were that they built in there, they needed that money
Yes.
to do that. So if the governor is committed not to take away an incentive that was offered to them to come here, then there's going to have to be some readjusting of what they leave in that budget. And I don't know that this General Assembly is willing to blink at this point. I think it's going to come down to the wire,
But we'll see what happens.
It's going to be interesting.
It will, for sure.
So just stay tuned. We're watching the budget every day to see when they go back and see where they'll be in that budget when they do it.
Thanks, Bill. And
thanks, David.
And thanks for tuning in.